So my name is Lesego Ramaila. I am a qualified CASA. I currently work for a UK-based firm, and my company is Gold City Offshoring, that is based in Sandton.
So what skills do you believe are most important for your success in your field?
I think the top two that I can say would be, number one, communication is a very important skill. I think that's something that's very undermined in my field of work. However, I do realize communication is not just limited to how you speak, it's also about understanding the people that you work with, understanding social cues, understanding how to address upper management, lower management, and also understanding how to work with trainees and more specifically younger people. I also think another important skill is just understanding yourself, because there is a tendency of adapting the personalities of the people that you work around. So if you're not necessarily strong in who you are, it's quite easier to get lost in the competitiveness of audit, the pressure of audit. So two important skills: communication and knowing yourself.
And how do you stay motivated in your field, in your work? How do you stay motivated and productive?
I think for me, I would have to preach for this moment. I honestly think my faith is the one that keeps me motivated. I always say to myself that I'm not working for my manager, I'm not working for the people in the office, I'm actually working for God. So whenever I am feeling demotivated, I always think, would God be happy in this moment? So for me, it is God, and it's also my family.
And in terms of the challenges that you're faced in your career, what kind of challenges should people expect, or not people expect, but what you want?
So the types of challenges is, number one, being comfortable with failure. I think accounting stream in general is deemed to be something that is very difficult to achieve or accomplish, but however, you do get to a point where you do come across failure, and sometimes people don't necessarily have the skill or the tenacity to come back from the failure. So those challenges are always going to be there. I don't think it's something that you can avoid, but having a mechanism to overcome it, I think, is very important. Over and above failure, I think it's also having to deal with not being comfortable with changing environments. The environment is constantly changing, the work papers are changing, the people that you work with are changing. So if you don't overcome the challenge of adapting to the people around you, then you're in trouble.
And what advice would you give to someone who's starting out in the accounting space or auditing?
I think the best advice for me would to say, be yourself, and learn that it's not always going to go in your favor, but it doesn't mean that is the end. I came to a point in my life where I thought the first time I failed an accounting test and failed my academic year, that life was over. Just know that failure is inevitable. It's not that you can avoid it, but if you are in there continuously showing up, being consistent, being disciplined, sitting down even though it feels uncomfortable, I think it's very important for you as a young person stepping into this academic journey.
And can you speak a bit about the importance of networking in your career?
So networking for me is extremely important. For somebody that has recently qualified, going to the cycle networking events has allowed me to build relationships with people outside the audit space. So it doesn't mean that just because you're a CASA you can stay into one academic area or one field of work. So if you network with people, you get to understand what can your key actually unlock. So you can network with different people from different industries, and you can also bring solid relationships in case you feel like you want to pivot from the current role that you're currently sitting in.
And how did you go about this networking?
So for me, obviously, number one, Psycho sends emails and tells us like how networking events work and which days are available. Outside the Psycho emails, I guess it's just being out there and talking to people that aren't necessarily in your circle. So your friends of your friends might be your networking circle. Your family members know other people that are potentially in the accounting stream. So just putting yourself out there and not just being so cooped up with your circle of friends and being at home will allow you to network even better.
Would you say, has everything been worth it so far?
I think it has. I don't want to say it hasn't been. 100% I feel like it has allowed me to know a different version of myself. I realize that I have a lot of resilience, I have a lot of strength within me, and my life is not just limited to the materialistic things. Yes, you can look at my car, you can look at where I live, you can look at where my daughter goes to school, but outside the physical things, I think character-wise, being somebody that's very self-assured, somebody that's very secure in who they are, I honestly believe like this journey has been the best thing ever.
Looking into the the fact that you work for a UK company, what's the difference between South African accountants and UK-based accountants in terms of the industry?
So I think in the UK, they have a bigger scope. They are a first world country. So some of the industries that are more prominent in their area, such as like care homes, that's something that I was never involved with when I was working at a big four firm within South Africa. So getting that industry exposure, because care homes in the UK are more prominent, has been the biggest difference. I also think the standards have quite changed. I think South Africa is very detailed. I don't want to lie and say South African standards are not at the par of where the UK is sitting. I am honestly going to be biased and say I do feel like South Africa is number one. We are number one as CASAs in the world in terms of our profession. So in terms of industry, it will depend on what is running in that company. So in South Africa, we know there's a lot of economic movement, there's a lot of media, television, telecommunications that are more prominent. But when you go to the UK, you get exposure to investment companies, you get exposure to venture capitalists, you also get exposure to care home industry. So it kind of depends on what is important in that specific country.
And what are some of the exit strategies that you've seen a lot of people in your space getting into once they leave the accounting space?
I think in South Africa, it's been very difficult to secure your job because of, number one, being understaffed and being underpaid. And then secondly, I think it's just lack of exposure. Even though we do have very booming industries such as telecoms and media and technology, some people want to broaden outside of that, and they also want to be compensated fairly. So the exit strategies that I see is that even though South Africa might have certain opportunities, people will opt with what's better for them, and financially that is something that is very at the top rank, if I could put it like that. And then secondly, I guess it's seeing what you don't know. So when you're limited in South Africa, you obviously see the industries that you're exposed to, but you also know there's things that you don't know. So the minute that people qualify, they do want to go abroad and they do want to see what is the first world countries doing that South Africa is not doing. So even for me, for myself, I wanted to have the best of both worlds. I decided to stay within South Africa while still having the option of seeing what happens abroad, just because I wanted to just make sure that I expose myself and I give myself the necessary platforms to try different things, and to know that even if I do decide to stay within South Africa, or I do decide to go within London or the UK, I'll be able to be diverse in the way I think, and I'll also have the necessary skills that I need in order to flourish wherever I decide to land.
And speaking about comps, what are some of the comp options that the market is paying, CAs?
That's very tricky. I'll give you a band, right? I think the average market-related salary for a CASA newly qualified, we'd say between 500 and 650,000 rand. However, because of exchange rates, if you do decide to stay in a national capacity and work for an abroad firm, obviously the exchange rate is for you and you will be above the market-related range. But it can go from anywhere between 500,000 to as much as 1.3 million if you're a newly qualified CA. If you obviously have the necessary experience, it does go further, but it is not limited to just being in audit. I think when you go in the market and you try different areas, the market related salary does expand. So it only depends on what you prefer, but my biggest range, I would have to say 500k and 1.3 million.
And what are some of the misconceptions about your work and the work that you do?
The misconceptions is that it's boring. The misconceptions is that people like us are not fun. The misconceptions are that we are always stressed, we don't have any personalities. But I feel like I am the anatomy of the difference between what people think my industry looks like versus they come to audit and they see that there's actually people that have character, people that have personality. I just think that because our environment is so secure, we deal with a lot of confidential information, a lot of restricted information. We do have to uphold a certain level of appearance and a certain level of integrity. So I can understand where somebody would come from when they have these misconceptions. But we're nice, we're easy, we easygoing people, we've got personality.
And lastly, are you happy?
Am I happy? I want to say yes. Had you asked me this question 2 weeks ago, I probably would have said no. But I think happiness is just choosing a mental state that you appreciate where you are. I think your gratitude is tied into your happiness. You might not know that you're actually feeling happy because you are so focused on everything that's going wrong. But today I decided to focus on what's going right, and I can honestly say I am very happy where I am.